Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott, and this is dedicated to all those spirits out there who believe life is meant to be magical and fun. Here we venture to share the very mysteries of self and reality. My purpose is to help light that spark inside of you, to reawaken your sense of fascination and awe towards the world. I'm going to try to help you hack reality and unleash your potential and open unlimited possibilities of wealth, health, and relationships in your life. Incredibly excited to have Bootsy Greenwood, Owen Hunt on the Reality Revolution. If you are a subscriber to my channel, you have to know Bootsy Greenwood. If you don't, I'm very surprised. If you've listened to Reality Transurfing, the book on YouTube, does an incredible job of narrating the book. He also does a great job of narrating Tufty the Princess. I'm a big fan of his narration, but if you look at his channel, he has got multiple videos that go chapter by chapter explaining reality transurfing. And to top it all off, he's a fan of Robert Anton Wilson. So I just was really excited to get a chance to talk to you and get an idea, talk about transurfing and all kinds of stuff. So welcome.
Thank you so much, man. It's truly my pleasure to be chatting with you. Thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So I remember going back. I remember actually reading Reality Transurfing a long time ago because it was related to another book. You know, it was one of those on Amazon where it said, if you like this, then you should. And I was going, some of it because it was the original translation, and it was a little bit, so I remember going, it's interesting, but something's, and then it kind of just stayed in the ether for me. And then I remember listening to the YouTube when you did the narration, and it changed. I accessed it way differently. I've slept listening to it. I've listened to it in the gym. I've listened to you on 4 or 5 times speed, and it's really, really helped me to understand what is kind of seemingly a very complicated subject. And so first I wanted to figure out, when did you first get exposed to reality transurfing, and how did you get the opportunity to narrate the book?
Well, my mom taught me a very valuable lesson from a young age: forgiveness, not permission. And that's how I got the opportunity to read the book, because I did try to reach out to the publisher and see if, we could work something out. But I think because like the way the Russian servers are and all that kind of stuff, I did not have any success. I could only get in touch with people on YouTube. So, and that was even after I had started posting. Did they even send anything to me? Or I don't know. Anyway, it's been so long ago, I don't really remember. But yeah, I got into reality transurfing because it was the only book that really brought all of these different pieces of information that, really tied them all together. Like I was a huge nerd, of course, like reading anything I could find, like all of Napoleon Hill's book, Outwitting the Devil, all his books, and really a big fan of Self-Reliance essay by Emerson, and those are probably my two, other than maybe the Kabbalion. Those are probably my 3 biggest books other than transurfing, and transurfing really takes all those ideas and smashes them together, plus adds a bunch of stuff. So when I found it, I was like, well, I've been reading all these different books, and I'm dedicating myself to this practice. This is what I'm doing. I believe in this. It brings all these ideas together, and instead of having like little pieces of this and that and all these different little self-help exercises, because there's tons of self-help books. I mean, I've read at least 1,000 self-help books. And that's because I was just so depressed, when I decided that I needed to turn my life around. So I just started reading as many self-help books as I could. And then reality transurfing was just presented to me at the perfect time. And so once I found it, I honestly started reading the book, maybe even for my own good, right? Like to just brainwash myself. And I'd narrated a couple of books, and I've been an audio engineer for a while. So it made sense to me to do that and to post it and to see just kind of how it would do. Like at the time, reality transurfing in English, it was available in every other language on YouTube, but in English, it was this awful computer voice, and to me it was just really antagonistic, and also so was the weird music that was creepy behind it. So I just didn't like the way it was presented anyway. And if you'll go back and listen, you'll even hear me like slurping a straw on the first one, and like just like really casually recording it. And I haven't even updated those first 3 chapters, but once people were excited and wanted me to do more, they started commenting, and I was like, oh, you guys like this? Well, I'm going to keep doing it because there's demand. And it's a good way for me to learn the principles of the book because I need to saturate in the information, But yeah, so then you'll notice the 4th chapter on, I stepped up my game production wise, and it sounds a lot better and clearer. And I was recording it at our studio.
Well, I thought the production was great all the way throughout. And listen, Audible, if you're out there, there's a great narrator I'm talking to right now. You need to use him for other books. You can also listen. I've listened to you do the Kabbalion. You have it on Gumroad, and you do some other stuff, some great meditations on there. And so you have real talent. It's hard, just outside of transurfing, just narrating a book like that. You have the perfect pace and speed. I think it's really brought it to the millions, to the masses, and it's really helped a lot of people get in touch with this material. And so I'm grateful for it. Thank you so much. It's just awesome.
I'm grateful to everyone. It's truly humbling, man. Like, so many people have reached out to me and sent me messages and stuff, and I'm a Cancer too. I just had my chart read today. So been crying all day. It's also my birthday. So, I'm just like, thank you. I appreciate it. In fact, yeah, we just passed the time and everything because I had to look that up on my birth certificate. But yeah, so, I'm always humbled and grateful when people say such nice things. And, I get squeamish and like I'm self-conscious too, and I just started making videos and all of that, like with my face in front of the camera, which I was very reluctant to do, but whatever, it is what it is. And I'm just happy to get the message out. Ultimately, I don't really care. It's not about me. It's about the message. I've got my own things that I'm trying to pursue as a human being, as an individual, my own goals and stuff. So anything that I can contribute to this knowledge system or to the world at large, I know it's just going to come back in spades. So, I haven't done anything other than like create a Patreon where you can see like me being weird and doing stand up. Well, I don't have a whole lot of stand up on there. I'm not going to release too much of that, but like I did my Randonaut excursion on there. And there's like my comedy carpool podcast where I talk to my nerdy comedy friends and just, different things like that. I'm just trying to put as much out as I can, but these principles are truly life-changing. I mean, once you start implementing the ideas in Vadim's book, like you're going to see results if you can hold out long enough to wait to see the results. Like you got to stay vigilant, but you will see the results.
Well, the really incredible thing about it is I can go back anytime, open up the book to any section. And even though I've read it many times, something will still leap out at me that I don't remember that touches me in that particular. It's one of those kind of books. So my question, just now that you've had access to this material and really gone deep in it, do you think that he channeled this, or do you think that? I mean, it seems like it came from. It's like as I've said in other podcasts, it's almost like I knew this beforehand. Mm-hmm. That it's knowledge that I had, and it's like I'm being told this information that I already knew, and that's why it seemed to be so profound.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. That's really hard to. What's interesting, yeah. Well, what I think is really interesting is that like the way Tufti's written, right? Like it's written from a goddess's perspective, and as if he channeled it, but it's not a real goddess. So I love that. Like so I'm obsessed with comedy. I have some friends like. Yeah, it's great writing, and like Jessa Reed has reached out to me, and I've been able to talk with her, and she's awesome. I highly recommend checking out her stand-up as well, but she's had a couple near-death experiences and came back and read Reality Transurfing, confirmed a bunch of stuff for her after death. So like as far as what you're saying, like a lot of this stuff I think is innate. Like we understand it somewhere deep down inside of us, and I can think of other books that have spoken to me beyond my mind, like maybe even The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, where I read the book and like honestly it just felt like it went past my brain. And I feel the same way about reality transurfing. And, as far as the method, I don't know what, at that point, the argument becomes, what don't we channel, right? Like, I mean, I do improv comedy. Like, that's just channeling. That the idea is to just be completely surrendering to the moment, to the group mind or whatever. And, those are just micro versions of what the macro is. And so, like above, so below. So that's a good question. I think that the majority of people in the world are probably, not channeling. They're probably just mindless, and it's almost, though, like channeling and mindlessness are almost kind of similar in a way. One's just on the other side, and the other's on another, where basically, I guess, pendulums are thinking you and working you over, as opposed to like opening up to some other sort of, maybe some other sort of pendulum, or maybe some other sort of entity, or who knows? I don't know. I can only speculate as far as all that goes. But yeah, I mean, it is so deep and so profound and prolific. And what's great about it is you can start out with the very basic concepts. Like, you can read the first 3 chapters and do it. And, I can't say that for a lot of other books, especially the esoteric books, because it just becomes this race to gather and more techniques and amass as many techniques. And what's next? And what's the next book? Well, once I get this down, just focus on the fundamentals, and that's where we need to start. And at that point, take it from there and go as deep as you want. But like, you don't have to you don't have to reach enlightenment, you know what I mean, or whatever, to meet your goals. They're just their goals, and I think it's practical, and it's written from a perspective that's not like super cheesy woo-woo too, It's like, I'm not, and also, speaking of like Robert Anton Wilson stuff, like that guy's so smart. Like, I'm nowhere near, I'm never going to have the brain power, the brilliance that man has, nor Vadim's, but I can understand the basics, and we all can, no matter how dumb or ignorant we are.
Right. The thing that's been crossing my mind lately as I continue to learn this material is the very word transurfing. It didn't mean as much before. It's just kind of word, but we are surfing almost transdimensionally. There's a surfing metaphor that's built into a lot of these chapters where you're balancing. Mm-hmm. It's literally like you're on a surfboard and you get the energy to pull up, and as the wave comes in, you jump on and you balance, and it's literally telling you all the things that are going to knock you off that surfboard. And that I keep on coming back to that. I wanted to get your reflection on that.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about it too. I don't know really what it means. My first guess is like transcendental surfing, I guess like that's the best that I've been able to come up with, because it's a translation from Russian. So how accurate could it be? I don't know anything about Russian. I don't know anything about Russian mysticism. I don't know anything about Russian history other than like watching Chernobyl. You know what I mean? Like, that's the extent of my knowledge. So it's really hard to know, but I think it's very accurate. I think that maybe it's a little bit of synchronicity there that it's translated like that. But I would imagine that it's got to be, pretty closely tied together as far as the original version goes.
It's interesting, on your last podcast, you had talked to the doctor that had done the translation. Mm-hmm. And also Vadim says this, that he did not come up with that word, that the transurfing has been around for a long time. And I find that kind of an interesting idea, that this is something that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that we talk about now has been around for a long time. I think that there's tons of information, ancient information, that's literally etched in stone that we don't have access to, that's been around for a very long time. And I think, I think that's in a lot of ways a shame, but if we can access, the source of that information, then we don't need this stone tablet. So it's interesting to me that they do exist in that form. And it's even more interesting to me that over half of them remain untranslated.
Which is why we don't see transurfing copyrighted. He's saying it's not mine to copyright, which is interesting.
Dude, that guy is a piece of work, man. Like,
have you ever communicated with him by email or any way, shape, or form?
I have not. Now Renee has, and she's the head of Transurfing North America and the leader of the Transurfing TV channel. She has. So has Dr. Salah Al Rashid, who I spoke with on the podcast. And they of course have glowing things to say. Of course, he's like the coolest dude, and he looks so cool, right? Like he looks like a character in the Matrix. Like he looks kind of like Neo's uncle or something. But
he's in the background with his sunglasses in a
he doesn't want any sort of like recognition. He doesn't want any glory. He doesn't want any of that. He just wants to convey the message. And I think that is just so on point with the book itself, because you start dealing with publishers and businesses and lawyers and all this kind of stuff. And no matter what books say, I don't know who, like insert your guru here. They're going to have a legal team and a publisher and all this kind of stuff that's going to come and hunt you down no matter what. And so, as far as the Transurfing TV and stuff goes and the email list and all that, it's like they're encouraging people to listen to the book as well as buy the book on Kindle. It's like $1 or something right now. Like they've made the price so cheap for people, like Salah said that he was like, I had to pay like $100 something for the book because it was so rare and hard to find, and now they're trying to just make it, which is great because it's just going to make the world a better place. It's going to help people to raise their consciousness levels and all that kind of stuff. Which brings me to, like, I was listening to your interview with Shlomo, and I had to like disagree with him even though he's a brilliant man. He's talking, you guys are talking about like, Yeah. I was like, man, am I allowed to use profanity on your podcast? So I was like, that's bullshit, man. Like he's talking about how this balance has to remain. Yeah, the balance has to remain. But how many bad piece of shit people are there in the world? Like way less than a third. You know what I'm saying? Like probably less than 10%. So it's not 50%. So that's not the balance. And now there's a lot of stupid people, there's a lot of ignorant people, but there's not a lot of bad people. Most people are just doing the best they can. They're just being manipulated by mass media, pendulums, etc. And they're just doing the best that they can. They're actually good-hearted, kind people. So I think that God is self-actualizing. And if we take Robert Anton Wilson's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness, we can literally see the pattern, because circuit 1 is the maternal, right? And if we go back into our whatever version of humanity that we're in right now, the beginning of it that's been kept record, you've got women walking around giving birth. Nobody knows where these babies are coming from. They're just falling out of women's vaginas. And so we're like, well, praise the feminine, right? Like that's what's going on. So, and then we become agricultural society, and we start putting all these laws in place, and we become paternal and the patriarchy and all of this and dominant and all that kind of stuff. But then we start getting into the semantic circuit, which is technocratic, which is where we're at now. So as much as I hate technocracy, it is a building block to the next level, which is the adolescent stage. So we haven't even gotten as a people to the adolescent stage, the emotional developing stage of our existence as a species. And then after that, we can access the higher levels of consciousness. I think God is climbing the ladder through us, right? Like that would be, and like I think Shlomo's a brilliant man. What the hell does he care what I think, right? But I'm going to disagree with that particular thing. The rest of that interview was brilliant, and I think he's an amazing character. But I just had to pick on that because
it was one of those, in that interview, I didn't know if I should argue with him, but
that's
nice. Literally the like reality revolution is really the name of my podcast. That's what it's about. I see us moving up that circuit. I see it. All the bad stuff that's happening in the world is an example of it. We're seeing our fears actualize faster. I just see it on so many levels. It's a reality revolution. And I think that reality transurfing is a part of that. I think that we're all becoming more aware and accessing these higher levels of consciousness, and it's moving faster. It's like a snowball going down the hill. It's getting bigger and faster. And everybody I talk to, people that are not even spiritual, are starting to notice synchronicities and things. And I think there's a revolution happening. I think it's a reality revolution. I really do. And I do think that we can raise our consciousness and our vibration as a whole. And now that we know about this, we can create a pendulum because there's no way to completely avoid. But we now that we can consciously create a pendulum that can access this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like pendulums are getting a bad rap. And that's something that on Transurfing TV, we're going to talk about. But like so like to just go back to that point about awakening or whatever, look at the Mayan civilization. We don't know what happened. Maybe God became self-aware and just vanished into whatever, ether or dimension, etc. And so like pendulums do get a bad rap though. Like pendulums literally keep nature in balance. Now, like when people know how to use and manipulate pendulums, of course, like there's a lot of destructive ones out there, but here's a good example that I learned from Renee, because I'm learning a ton from her. Right now we're doing a series called Transurf and Chill. And it's like a date with the space of variations, a date with the pendulums and all this kind of stuff. But she's literally just pouring it out. And I get to sit at her feet and I get to listen and learn all of the stuff that she's been learning for the past 5 years. But basically, as far as pendulums go, it's how you engage with a pendulum. You have to manage how you engage with it. Are you getting more from it than it's taking from you? Is it at least equal? Because if you're, let's say, okay, go with a media example. Let's say you're a newscaster. Well, you want that pendulum to light you up. But if you're an everyday citizen who freaks out and is, neurotic, then you can't be watching CNN more than 10 minutes a day, because it's going to turn you into a nervous wreck. But again, if you're the newscaster, if you're the anchor, well, you want that to be popular because it's going to lift you up. So that's kind of, pendulums getting a bad rap because like all pendulums are bad. No, that's not true. All pendulums are not bad. All pendulums are pendulums, and they are completely indifferent. So, it's not anything that it's how we interact with the pendulum that makes it destructive or not. And if we interact with it and we give it our energy and it takes our energy away, then yeah, it's destructive. But if we know how to glide across pendulums, like a lot of comedians and other people do, and then they can light us up,
Once we become aware of the dynamics of the pendulum consciously, we can start to create pendulums that can actually serve as for the better good. At least that's my belief.
I agree. No, you're right. I mean, I believe you're right. I won't say anything definitively, but I believe you. I believe you're right. Renee would agree. I believe Vadim would agree. The reality transurfing camp as a whole would agree, because she even shared with me that like at one point, like one of the instructors was like, oh, well, all pendulums are bad. And we were like, no. They had to kind of correct that and turn things around within that, whatever class that was, like a 1-day thing. And they were like, nope, that's not actually true. Let's actually break this down. So, like it's easy to fall into that camp once you figure out what pendulums are. It's like, but it's not, there's no big bad wolf out there. This is ancient knowledge. It's been around for who knows how many iterations of humankind,
So when I started before reality transurfing, I was completely fascinated by quantum physics, and I had some Mandela effect personal type of experiences about parallel reality. So I want to ask you, and there's not a right answer, but it felt like when I first read it, he's talking about parallel realities, or at least the many worlds theory model. But you can argue both sides of it. It could be just the information field has information about the parallel realities. What is your opinion on parallel realities and reality transurfing?
Well, based on what he talks about in the book, he's putting evidence forth for the parallel realities theory, the multiverse. There's Rick and Morty kind of stuff happening within what he's talking about, right? Like, and in Tufty, damn, I can't believe I mispronounced that entire book. Sorry. Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop pronouncing anything. I'm just gonna be like, oh, no, the thing that your spiritual limb. But no, in Tufty, he talks about at the end of the book, or she does, that like this phenomenon that happened with a bunch of passengers on a train in Italy who went through a cave and wound up in Mexico, like X amount of years. I can't remember if it was the future or the past. But I mean, if we're talking about ripples in reality like that, then Bernstein, bears, who knows, dude? Potato, tomato. I mean, there are infinite spoons. So I think that more is possible than we think,
Right. I think it opens up the... I'm interrupting you. I apologize.
You're too nice.
I just get the feeling that's the parallel realities. Once you accept that idea, the idea of infinite possibilities becomes more realistic. It's easier for you to accept that you can do that and you can accomplish that. I meet a lot of people that are just like, that's impossible. And it's not. And that's one thing, that the acceptance of this parallel reality, literally every possibility is out there. And if you access it the right way and you surf into that reality, that's one thing it does. Even if you don't believe in the parallel reality, if you accept the possibility of at least the information of it, it does allow you to, part of your heart and mind, to open up to the possibility, which is part of that process. So
yeah, you're exactly right. See, that's what sets transurfing apart from all the other models. Because in like Western self-help, we have to create this thing. And I'm so sick of the word manifest. It makes me want to, I don't even want to say. Like, I guess it's probably technically accurate too, but I just feel like it's like the Hotel California of terminology in the spiritual movement. It's like, if I hear this one more time, I'm going to go home and see how many guns I can fit in my mouth. Anyway, that's not the thing. That's not how it works, right? Like, what you're saying is exactly accurate. On the other side of the mirror, there are infinite variations. There are infinite possibilities on the other side of the mirror. When we learn to choose, then we can have whichever one of those, because in the information space, in that vault, whatever that is, a treasure chest, however you visualize that, every single possibility exists. There are infinite spoons. And in the Matrix, when the kid's like, there's no spoon, that's not true. There are infinite spoons. That's why it's bending. Your perception is what is bending from reality to reality. So it looks like the spoon's bending, but it's just in a different place. So like, thinking of it that way, it makes all of these possibilities so much more accessible. Whatever that thing is that you didn't think you could do because you blah, 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 X or Y or Z. And like, not everybody's a great singer, for instance. So like, like whatever that is. But for the most part, like, every single thing that you could access, it does exist somewhere. It might be further away, right? Like, if you can't carry a tune and you're tone deaf, then in this reality, you're probably not going to be a singer, but it does exist within the space of variations. Don't let me tell you. There you go. Like, Daniel Johnston is one of the most prolific songwriters ever of all time. And he can't sing a lick nor play the guitar. He's a good piano player, but that's about it. But yeah, like, thinking of it that way, it's a huge shift, because it's like thinking about like miracles that have happened and things like that. It's like, well, instead of him turning water into wine, well, it's so much more feasible to think about, to try and wrap our head around it, which is impossible. But it makes a lot more sense to think, oh, he just transitioned from a reality where barrels were filled with water to a reality where barrels were filled with wine. So that's a much easier thing for our mind to accept, and it's a much easier thing for us to implement in our own life, so that we can have the outcome that we want, right? Like, again, there are certain realities that are further away. It's like, I'm not going to become a brain surgeon. That's just not, it's too far away. And he even, exactly. It is still there. Exactly. It's still there. Like, I'm not going to be the emperor of a country, because that's not even possible at all in this reality. Now, is there a film role with that on it? Sure. But we can't navigate to there. You know what I'm saying? So there are some things that are limited, but honestly, like, if people can hop on a train in Italy and wind up in Mexico sometime in the future or past, well, I think that there's a lot more possible than we give credit for.
Now, the word supernatural is a little loaded, but I want to ask, have you ever had anything supernatural, especially since you've learned this, happen to you? I always like to ask that question.
That's a good question. Since I've been practicing this, I wouldn't call any of the experiences that I've had supernatural. I've had some pretty miraculous things happen. But when I was a kid, I got into the Pentecostal church when I was like 16, 17 years old. And I've literally seen people healed of certain things. I've seen limbs grow back. I've seen people legitimately get out of like wheelchairs and stuff. And I saw that when I was in the church, and I always wondered how those things happen. Like, because I backslid, like I'm a backslidden Pentecostal or whatever. But like, I was still puzzled constantly. Like, that always plagued me, even when I went through my like super objectivist sort of everything must make sense, scientific phase. I was like, well, damn, I mean, I saw I saw some crazy things happen in the church, and I don't know how to quantify that. But now that I've read Transurfing, I'm like, oh, you know what? It's not the ritual. It's not the laying on of hands. It's not the prayer. It's the belief. So regardless of what you practice, whether it be Hermetic or Christian or whatever, and it doesn't matter. What's great about Transurfing is it fits in with any of those paradigms. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Buddhist, you can be any belief system that you choose, or as Robert Anton Wilson calls them, BSs, or none at all, and you can implement the principles in Transurfing because it's natural law. It's just natural law, like in the Kabbalion, but it's just a much more accessible roadmap.
One of the coolest metaphors that you kind of talked about on one of your videos was the idea of the raindrop. I just,
The particle of God.
Yeah.
And it always comes to mind. I don't know. I'm just completely unrelated, but the idea that the cloud forms this raindrop and we're just this raindrop that's falling down. I think I might have even mentioned that on Shlomo's interview.
I think you did. Yeah.
Was that in the book?
Yeah, that's in the book. He says that each one of us are a particle of God, or maybe it's in 78 days or something like that. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense because look around us. No snowflakes are the same. No fingerprints are the same. No cloud is the same. The sky will never look in this moment like it does ever again, ever. That's a lot of variation. There's a lot of different possibilities within that. So yeah, so the idea, and I think, if you talk to someone who's had an NDE, which I'm admittedly kind of obsessed with NDEs, they would tell you that, when you escape this meat suit, that you head up into whatever this ocean of consciousness. And when you come back, everything's a joke at that point. Like, it's not even fathomable that anything's important, even pain, any of that. Not to say that I don't fear pain, like I don't want to feel pain, but like at the same time, somebody who's ejected out of one of these things, they come back and they're like, it's just a video game.
Right. So it's interesting because with a lot of self-help books, they talk about meditation, and he doesn't really, meditation is not mentioned in Reality Transurfing. So I was wondering to get because you have some interesting meditations on your Gumroad, and so you meditate, so where do you think they merge? You can obviously do it without meditation. Do you think meditation can enhance or help Reality Transurfing?
Consciousness is attention. That's all consciousness is. So all meditation is, and I've come a long way since those meditations, to be honest. Like, I had a very profound experience that inspired me to make those meditations, and I stand by them. That's why they're still on the site. But, I don't actually meditate per se anymore. Since I read Tufte, and also within the past couple of years, meditation became this tool for me to escape from. It became really an escape. It did, because I would focus my attention during my meditation, and then I was just like a chronic marijuana user. So I'd just be wrecked all day, so I'd just be like high all day, not paying attention, and then attentive for 15 minutes a day. Right. And so I'm not going to say I'm completely sober at the moment, but like, I'm not going to say what people should or shouldn't do. That has nothing to do with me. And I frankly don't care. But for me, I had to, that was something that I needed to balance, and I needed to shift and change in my own life so that I could be more attentive all the time and sharper, especially doing comedy and stuff like that. Like, I have to be 2 steps ahead of an audience if I'm doing comedy, whether it be improv or stand up or whatever. So I don't want to be slow and brain dead, because that's not going to help me. So that was something that I chose to change in my life. And part of that shift was that I stopped meditating as well. And I started to try and focus on the awareness center as opposed to the outer screen or the inner screen. So that's kind of where I stand on it. And whatever practice works for you, like if you like to meditate, then that's great. If you don't, then you don't have to. The point is that consciousness is attention, and whatever your attention is focusing on, that's you. That's what's happening. So understand understand that. Understand that whatever it is, where attention goes, energy flows. Like everything that you are paying attention to is what you're putting into. So whether that be positive, negative, brainless mindlessness, whatever, and make your own choices, of course. But yeah, I think meditation's a great tool. I think it can be like anything else. Anything's a tool. It's just dependent on how we use it. So it can be very beneficial, or it can actually hurt you if you're not careful. Because like I said, I did it for 5 years. I did yoga for 2 years. I'm probably going to start back doing yoga, but I don't think that I'm going to start back with meditation, at least not in the way that I was doing it, because I don't know, like there was a balance. Maybe I do start back with it. I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but at the moment, I'm trying to stay focused on my personal awareness center, which I find right here in the middle of my chest, between my stomach and my heart, sort of. And that's kind of like what I've been working on and practicing. And I'll always or not always, but and as often as possible, check my breath, like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm in control of my breath. I'm not being breathed. Right.
So Tufty was an amazing book. And it was very, very different than reality transurfing. And I was completely fascinated by this idea of the plat. And I almost immediately started asking my friend, where have you heard this before? I knew that there's the Bindu chakra. Had you ever heard of a reference of an energy center or anything similar to the plat before you read that book? Because you had read a lot of self-help books like me, right?
I have, but I never heard anything like that. Now, the closest thing that I could find after the fact, someone presented me with Carlos Castaneda's book, The Fire Within, and he does talk about it in there. And then I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was like, Carlos Castaneda's a hoax, right? Like he's a hoax. And I was like, okay, who told you that? I don't know one way or the other, but that's the only reference that I personally know of. Now, I was messaging on Instagram with a good friend of mine, and he was telling me that his guru, and he literally used that word, which I'm like anti-guru. I don't believe in gurus, but he was saying that his guru focused on, instead of focusing on the mind and the wrinkle of the brow, right, like, which is inner intention, as we know, that the focus would be behind the head. So there it is again in another form and another idea. And when I've talked to Jessa, who's like an amazing creature, dude, if you can get her on your show, I recommend doing it. And I'll send you her link to her comedy too, because she's a hilarious comedian, and she's got quite a story, but she helped me a lot with this particular idea. And I think I spoke with Karen Rontowski as well about this, in pretty good depth, and who I'd also recommend as a great guest and also a great comedian, or comedian. I just read her post today, and she likes comedian, so comedian it is. So, but she just sort of like this Star Wars appendage, right? Like this thing that comes off the back, like the crown chakra here, right? Or where like the Daniel Johnston photos where the top of the head's just chopped off and energy shooting out. She says that when she activates it, it's like the Star Wars sort of ponytail that comes down to between her shoulder blades. And then when she focuses on it and activates it, then it actually comes up above her head, which I've been using that particular visual because that's in my head. But as I've talked to a lot of other people, they have their own sort of version, their own sort of way to visualize it, which I think is good. I think everyone is different, and we all need to tune in to how we experience this phantom limb, this plate or plait or braid or whatever it's called, and really feel it in our own way. Now, because she told it to me that way and drew me a weird picture that she sent me via like Facebook Messenger or whatever, that's kind of how I see it now. But however it is that you experience it, that's sacred, and that's between you and, infinity or the universe or God or whatever term you want to use for something you cannot put in a box.
Right. Carlos Castaneda did mention the umbrage point. And that's what, yes. But the interesting thing, when you sit back and think about it, he talks about in one of his other non-translated books, I've got a bad translate, he talks about how the Matrix is a real thing. And you think about it, could this really be that there's some memory in our past of us being plugged in
Oh,
to
yeah.
something? I mean, that the implications of it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it could mean maybe there's some reincarnated memory that we have, that we were plugged in and we were experiencing reality because of that. And now that we're outside of it, or maybe that we're an avatar, who knows? But there's an implication behind the idea of the plate. And it's really amazing because, of course, I feel it now, and I literally feel it. Before I read the book, I didn't, but now, and I'm creating this, but it's fascinating. I'm completely fascinated by this huge new change in my own reality from understanding the plate.
Yeah, it's super curious, right? Well, what's interesting about it is she or he says in the book of Tufte that that's what is pushing us around, right? Like we're being led around by that particular appendage when we're not aware of it, when we're not accessing it, when we're not using it, which is super interesting. And so like becoming aware of it is like, it's huge. And you'll probably notice that when you're out in public and you activate it, then people will look at you a little bit.
Yes, I have noticed this.
Yeah.
Just walking just in the grocery store line, just thought comes to my head, and then people will turn over and look at me. He even mentions once you become aware that you'll light up a little bit. People notice you. He even mentions that in the book.
Yeah, I've experienced it. Like I was at Starbucks talking to a friend of mine, and it just got a little bit weird. Like I felt like I was in a cage or something. Like what are we Like are we hamsters or something? Like why are you guys staring so hard? So yeah, I've had the experience too. It's almost to the point.
Have you activated on stage?
Man, I'm still kind of getting a little bit better on stage. There's so much to focus on when I'm on stage, to be honest. Like I'm still trying to focus just on my awareness center when I'm on stage. And it sort of depends like in what capacity I'm performing, right? Like I have a different approach for improv than I do for stand-up comedy because they're basically, and I was talking to someone today, actually, Vicky Sumner, who works for the BBC. She interviewed me about comedy writing this morning, which was super cool. And I had so much fun talking about that. I don't get to, I don't get to talk about that too much publicly. I get to talk with my friends about it and stuff. But she was asking me about that today, and they're just so different. Like literally could not be more polar opposites. Like it is literally like one gender and another gender. Like it couldn't be any different than those two things, because when you do improv, you're at the mercy of the scene. And you basically need to surrender. Now, if you surrender on stage as a stand-up comic, you are going to get eaten alive up there. You have to generate all the emotions. It's so fake. You have to generate all the emotions. I don't know why I keep doing it, but I just can't stop. But you have to generate and create this whole world for people, like, and it needs to seem like it's genuine and you're just now coming up with it off the top of your head, even though you've practiced it 400 times. Whereas improv, you're literally making up everything off the top of your head. And it's easier for me to do that because I can feel the energy of what's being created on stage. Whereas in stand-up, I feel the energy of the audience basically sitting on the edge of their seats and being like, okay, buddy, make me laugh. I dare you, So it's a little bit more, aggressive as far as the audience's expectations go. And I'm really sensitive to the energies. So I'm still kind of getting all of those things together. And I've had a pretty extensive background doing music. So I'm not like mortified on stage, but still doing stand-up comedy versus any other style of performance, I don't think it's comparable.
Well, as an old public speaking teacher, I'm fascinated when I get to talk to a comedian, and I always tell me about the first time. It's almost like when you talk to somebody about the first time that they had sex. Sure. The first time you got up and did comedy, I just love to hear about it, just to get the sensory, because it's fascinating. I know I probably would blow it my first time, but I know that the physical kinesthetic feeling of it is probably locked in your memory pretty profoundly. Especially that first time, you're like, I'm going to go up and I don't know what the hell's going to happen. I'm going to try to make people laugh. So I'd love to hear like your experience with that.
Sure. The first time, I actually did okay. I actually did pretty good. And, I lost my train of thought about 3 minutes in. I did 5 minutes like most people do, 5 minutes first set. First 3 minutes went pretty well, and then I kind of forgot some stuff. And I dude, for whatever reason, like I forget punchlines. Like I'm so good at just like hammering on my point. like I could have been probably a decent debater, but like for whatever reason, like so often I forget punchlines, which is like probably the worst Achilles heel to have as a comedian. But you know, it's just part of like what I need to improve upon. And I've got some new techniques and ideas for that, but it just wasn't. I'd say that stand-up comedy is not what you think it is. Like no matter who you are before you get involved in it, it's just not ever going to match your expectations. And most things in life don't match what our expectations are before. Like I thought the first time I went scuba diving that I was going to fall in love with scuba diving and I was ready to become a scuba dive instructor. Then I went down and my nose bled and I came up and I had a headache and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. But yeah, like it was the first time I did stand up. Like I said, I had written something, so I had it memorized. I mean, I did it hundreds of times. Like I did that 5 minutes, probably 120, 130 times realistically before I went up. And I still got lost 3 minutes in because of the overwhelming energy of the audience. And like I said, I'm just like I'm basically a woman. And, you know, I don't mean any offense by that, but, you know, I just had my chart read today by this awesome lady, my friend Emmy. And she was like, I'm basically a gay man in a woman's body. And she's like, and you're a woman in a man's body. And it couldn't be closer to the truth as far as like what we perceive of as feminine, basically is what she's saying. She's saying that I'm very feminine. That has nothing to do with physical gender, but I know you do. But, you know, just to clarify for all the people out there who want to troll me, come troll me. Come on. I need haters. I don't have enough. But like, yeah, like, so I'm really sensitive. So for me, that's why I'm better at improv. So I've got to figure out how to relegate that and put those two worlds together so that I don't get distracted by the energy of the audience and I can still hammer and tomahawk chop forward with my stand-up set. But I also want to bring in the ability to work the crowd as well. And when you're doing 5-minute open mics with 6 people in the room, it's kind of hard to do crowd work. But, you know, as I continue to improve and, you know, just time and repetition, then I think that I'll get to the point where I'm comfortable on stage and then I'll have a better answer for what it's like because, you know, it's like, I don't know, like so much information coming at you from out here, but you're trying like hell just to hold on to what you know you're supposed to bring to the table in here. So it's basically like trying to hit a baseball, but you have 150 pitchers pitching at you. That's how I would explain stand-up comedy to anybody who's never tried it before.
Well, it's a fascinating art form, and I'm definitely aware it's completely different than what I could imagine. I have so much respect for anybody that does it. Even if they blow it, I still have respect. Anybody that wants to get up and make people laugh, I think it's awesome. So
I have the most respect for the audience that comes out and subjects themselves to it because, there's some bad sets out there. I'm personally responsible for some of that, you know, so God bless the audiences that come out, you know, cause you never know what you're going to get at a stand-up show, especially an open mic.
So I ask this question on every interview, especially since you use reality transurfing. Do you have a morning routine that you've evolved or used? I collect morning routines, and if you don't have one, that's great too. I just would love to know what your particular morning routine is.
So it just depends on the day for me. I don't really have a routine. Routines really don't work for me. I'm not like a very regimented type of person. Now, I do have activities that I do in the morning. I try not to look at my phone, which I'm getting not that great at. I try not to look at my phone for the first at least hour that I'm awake. And then I also will do morning pages every day. So if you're not familiar, it's from a book called The Artist's Way. And it's a great book. And the idea of that is that you basically, I guess, channel, for lack of a better way to say it. You just sit down on the computer or your journal, however you write, and then you just free write. It's creative writing, you know, as soon as you wake up, because you're coming from the dream space and you're not in your rational mind. So you're very likely to stumble upon some golden nuggets that way. So that's the philosophy behind doing it immediately first thing in the morning. And then, you just free write for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour. And I found it to be an incredibly beneficial practice, because when I sit down and intentionally write, it just kind of comes right out, and I don't have to worry so much. He talks a lot about in the book about creativity and how to create something and to build a layer, and then to come back, like take a step away and then come back and build another layer, and then step away and then come back and build another. The stand-up comedy is exactly that. And I think that most art forms are as well. Like songwriting was for me very, very similar. Every once in a while I'd sit down and write a song in one sitting, but the 99% of the time, even if I did that, I'd still come back and tweak something, you know what I mean? So that's my biggest thing is morning pages. I do morning pages, not every day, but I try to do them as many days as possible. Today was my birthday, so just kind of like went and had a bagel with a friend instead of doing that. And that I've been on I don't know, you're like the fourth person that I've talked to today, so I'm really grateful to be able to chat with so many amazing people and connect today. Because I'm an introvert extrovert, so I can be introverted, but I also very much like to collaborate and work with people. So I'm honored. I couldn't ask for a better birthday. So I'm gonna go and have dinner.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. Yeah. I'm gonna go have dinner with my friend after this, and see some folks, and hug their necks, and drink some soda water or whatever, and just kind of have a nice chill evening after working and creating content all day and staring at my computer screen and damn near going cross-eyed. Do
you have any books that you'd recommend for the reality revolution other than reality transurfing?
Of course.
They can be fiction books. It's all good. Just any books that you recommend.
Yeah. I recommend Outwitting the Devil. That is the second best by Napoleon Hill. That's the second best book I've ever read in my life. Reality transurfing being number one. I also recommend Self-Reliance Essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which you can find on my YouTube channel as well as on Gumroad. And I also really like the Kybalion as well. It's a little bit esoteric and harder to understand, but I really like all three of those books in this particular vein. Nonfiction. I don't know. I don't honestly read a lot of nonfiction, or I haven't in a long time. I really like Chuck Palahniuk's work and like Cormac McCarthy and, like a lot of those style of authors. But yeah, I mean, I'd say if you haven't read Outwitting the Devil, then you absolutely should. If you're listening to this podcast, then you're going to love that book.
People don't know, but they love Napoleon Hill. I'll talk to them. Have you read Outwitting the Devil? No. It's pretty.
It's so good. And if you're a guy out there, do you know who David Data is?
David Data. Oh my gosh, no, I don't. Maybe.
Cool. So he's kind of he teaches like dynamics between couples and Kundalini and Tantra and stuff like that. It's DEIDA. He wrote a book called The Way of the Superior Man that I very, very, very much like. It's excellent. So as far as and he talks about it as well. He's talking about masculine energy particularly, right? It's written to a masculine person, whatever their gender is, but to that masculine aspect. And it's basically like, don't be a wuss, but don't be an asshole. You know what I mean? It's finding that middle ground between those two poles, because like a lot of us have become beaten down by society to just surrender to whatever you think, versus the asshole who gets a lot of attractive attention from women, but he's a misogynist. So you don't have to be one or the other. There is a middle ground where you can still be masculine and embody those characteristics of a cowboy without offending people and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a masculine person or a female, it doesn't matter, just to understand those energies and how those polarities work together, male or female, doesn't matter. It's a great book, and I highly recommend that book to folks too. The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. Yeah, it's good.
And then one other, I'm a huge movie buff and I love movies. So would you recommend a movie that I might not have heard of? Is there a movie out there that you'd recommend that I might not have heard of?
Well, my favorite movie is Spartacus. It's a Kubrick movie. I'm sure you've heard of that one. But I love that movie. To me, that's the story of human, being human. And I love that movie a lot. I've been watching a lot of like these series now because I think it's cool. Like I have worked in the past at least in film production. So I work for Netflix and MGM and all that kind of stuff. And the way things have changed now is like if you have a script for a movie, nobody's buying it because how it used to be was there's a limited amount of film, and so you could try to film a book in 2 hours. But how long does it take to sit down and read a book? Well, you need that amount of time to show what happens in the book. Well, now that there's these series on Netflix and Hulu and all that all the streaming platforms, you can actually tell the story of an entire book. It is amazing. Yeah. So, that being the case, I really like The OA. I don't know if you've heard of it. Yeah, on Netflix. Dude, so good. I just finished that. And then I watched the new season of Stranger Things. And that's really, really good. And I watch like a bunch of goofy stuff. I watch a lot of stand-up comedy. And there's some cool apps that I've found. Like I found this one called Popcorn Flicks. It's like popcorn comedy that you can download if you have like a Roku or something like that. And both of Steve Martin's NBC specials are on there, and I highly recommend both of those. They're both sketch, mostly sketch, so it's not his stand-up. Now his stand-up's great if you can find that, but the sketches are so good and absurdist, and I love his nature. He's so gentle, and so funny. And then when he does break character, it's even better. But they're really goofy and zany specials, and you can find them on there. It's absolutely a free app, and there's a bunch of other different comic specials and stuff on there as well. But those are some hidden gems that I'd highly recommend to any comedy fans.
Masterclass has a class by Steve Martin talking about how to write comedy.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I was pretty impressed by it. Yeah.
Did you watch Judd Apatow's as well?
Oh yeah. There's some really good classes in the master class. I recommend it for anybody as well. I mean,
$180 is a bargain for that.
It's worth it. Yeah.
Ron
amazing. With some the people are spending $500 for classes, and then the master class is amazing. So. Happy birthday. I just want to thank you for being so gracious with your time. It meant so much. I learned so much. We just getting started. I hope that we can talk again.
Yeah.
And go even deeper with this stuff.
Yeah.
And please, if anybody's listening, this is one of the best book narrators. And I hope that I hear some more books with your sweet golden voice. Keep it up.
Dude, thank you so much. That's really sweet.
Keep it up and look for you, Owen Hunt, for improv. And Bootsy Greenwood, Patreon / Bootsy Greenwood, and Gumroad / Bootsy Greenwood. And also you got the Transurfing podcast, and your YouTube channel is amazing. Every single episode, you're breaking down these chapters in ways that I'm learning something every time. It doesn't matter if you've read this material 20 times, you're bringing unique knowledge to this stuff, and it really means a lot. You really made my life better with your contribution, and I want to thank you because it means a lot. And thank you for allowing me to talk with you today.
Oh, dude, come on, man. Thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate it, and I'm super grateful for the time. I also learned a tremendous amount. I really like your show, and I look forward to many, many more episodes of what you're putting out there. Thank you so much for sharing this message.
So go out and enjoy your birthay, all right?
All right, I'll do it, man. Soda waters, bottomless soda waters. Here we go.
That's right. Have a good one.
All right, thanks, Brian.